Hi, today I'm going to be talking about technology and our senses. Now, while we're exploring the question, does technology weaken our natural senses? Let's think about the quote by General from the US Army, Omar Bradley. Is our technology our servant, or are we becoming its slave? Now, what are the senses? Many people, when they think about the senses, they think about sight, touch, hearing, taste, smell. Now, we even sing nursery rhymes about this. But these aren't the only five senses. Throughout human history, we have been evolving. Of course, people know the physical attributes of biological evolution, as everyone is different. But in our cities, in our day-to-day lives, we have to adapt ourselves to form better with our technology. And as you can see, we adapt to our environments, like we live in the city of Houston. Now, all of these senses that we have, that I'm talking about beyond the five senses, some examples are follow the leader, fight or flight, but also according to olfactory, you need a combination of these senses to help your brain adapt to the situation you're in. So for example, here in 3D art that you see kind of like pavement art, if you didn't have all your senses together to help you, then you wouldn't have been able to perceive this properly. And this can tamper with your situational awareness, and that's why things like accidents can happen. Now, technology is essential in our lives. We use it every single day. You have that morning 5-minute crunch. You need that coffee maker. Nobody has time to do this, all this coffee and water and milk and all that stuff. And we live in Houston. You don't know if you need to wear a dress, wear a jacket, so you need your weather apps. But according to Extrasensory, we need to preserve our natural senses so we can use this technology that we are inventing. And if we don't preserve our natural senses, then all of this information we're getting is useless. Now first, let's talk about the eyes. Of course, 85% of our perception comes from the eyes. That's what the brain depends on, that's what we evolved to depend on. And according to Optometric Association, blue light from this computers and screens you talk about, this makes us nearsighted. Now, of course this weakens us physically. But over time, an interesting fact is we have evolved such that today's generation of students, they're actually becoming nearsighted. So many kids from ages 5 to 13 have glasses. Like, look at me, I have glasses already. And I've had weak eyes since I was born. And this is a phenomenon based on evolution that's happening because of technology. And now hearing. Of course, hearing, we like to listen to the latest pop hit song using our wireless headphones. You know, let's jam it out. But there is a counter argument here that where people say, oh, we're aging, you know, by the time we get to age 75, we're going to get hearing aids, and you know, that's how it works. But according to a study from Digital Responsibility Organization, kids from ages 12 to 19 are experiencing up to 20% hearing loss. This is terrible, because up until the age of 21, we're supposed to be growing, not deteriorating our senses. Now let's go to handling technology through most people, when they think of the sense of touch, they think of their hands. And not only has writing been outdated, but the last time we had hand-wrote things was based on maybe our Christmas letters to our family and friends. But going away from the obvious, this might also lead to emotional and communicational issues. According to Public Source, we depend on the corners of our eyes, our mouth, and eyebrows to understand people's emotions. You can't really use sarcasm in technology, can you? Now this emotional face-to-face goes away when you use Skype or Twitter, whatnot. Now, olfactory continues to describe our sense of smell as the most paramount sense for survival. Now, aside from the scientific studies that Axel has made, he also describes that some senses your limits can be derived from your genes, but also your repeated bad habits can continue to fuel this bad sense activities. And so, smell as a survival, these bright lights that companies use, it stimulates a hormone called ghrelin that makes you even more hungry. So when you stop by the food court, some of your friends will want to stop by the food court. We like sugar, fermented items like bread, and this is all making us go towards this, the weakening of our sense of smell. Then when I mean weakening, I mean there are neurologists at the Flavors and Fragrances Corporations, and they've been spent years trying to find our flaws in our biological systems that control our thoughts and behavior. Now the brain is the most important part of our body because the bright flashing lights, they cause inattentive blindness. And this inattentive blindness makes us lose our ability to focus because we can't multitask. We do something called fast switching, where we go in between text messages, driving, and we can't really multitask that way. And therefore, we can't make complex inferences, we can't look at our surrounding situations. Now let's talk about evolution. Here you can see a Wall-E person that was living on the ship. They haven't needed to walk in years, so they'd rather have an extra food storage compartment than actually having to walk. Just like that, if we don't preserve our senses and rely on technology, then we won't have to use our natural senses and they will deteriorate. Now, what assumptions do we have to make before the solution comes? The technology will always be there. Just because you go outside and you can't identify which way is north doesn't mean that your phone isn't going to be there when you need it. The GPS is going to be there. Evolution is inevitable and change is absolutely necessary. You can't be continuing to live in the primitive forms, but there are ways that you can help your natural senses. According to Optometric Association 20-20-20 rule, take 20 minutes break after every 20 minutes of electronic use. Also, you can read a book before you go to bed. So does technology weaken our natural senses? The answer is yes, but it's a part of our evolutionary process to adapt to the modern world. Now, limitations and justifications. It does, so if you say, does it weaken our senses? Yes, it does. Once a person gets glasses, he can't go back to 20/20 vision. But you can't say that it doesn't weaken our senses, because this is permanent damage and explains survival. So you can't say like we're not changing, because over time we have changed, we have evolved, and this makes sure that we can adapt to our natural environment. So, for example, if you have your cell phones, then whenever it rings, in a group of 20 people, all 20 of them are going to check their cell phones. It cannot justify further technical advances. So if we're saying that it damages our senses, then how are we going to justify creating new senses? So that's why we need to help our senses. Also, in articles like Extrasensory, they mention enhancements to our senses, and this is important because this solution doesn't take into account that these sort of technology can actually help our senses. So in the end, we are changing to reflect our modern environment. Thank you very much. Here's my feedback. Thank you.
All right. So, how valid and reliable are the sources you use, and how do you know in which sources didn't work?
So the sources which I use came from researchers at UCLA, Jesuit colleges. They came from University of Calgary. They came from government resources, Optometric Association, and of course, over the years, they've done so much research on this kind of stuff. And this makes sure that the effects aren't hypothetical and they're concrete evidence that someone can point to. And these are reliable because these are government agencies and they're looking out for the welfare of the people.
All right. If you have more time with additional research, would you conduct related to the issue?
Actually, there was one economic point that I wanted to, I love economy. So right where the point where they were talking about your sense of smell and how neurologists were going out of their way to find your weaknesses, that's just one example of one sense. But like, for example, if you see the color green is very pleasing and the red on your paper when you get marked off for points, that's very disheartening. And that's not a coincidence. For example, this slide was blue. It's pleasing. It's a natural sense. And I want to know how these neurologists exploit these weaknesses in people. Like ads, you see a lot of foods like fermented foods like breads and fried and salt. That's what people like. Visually, they like bright screens. In the sense of hearing, they like dance music, which includes, music and beatboxing and all these kind of drums. And that's what people, I want to see how they do the research to know what people like and how these weaknesses boost the economy around the world.
Good job.